All right, so I'll go ahead and start this recording, and hopefully we'll capture a little bit of the, we should talk about that we just did
yes.
before recording. Welcome, friends, to the Unwritten Earth Symposium podcast, the show where I sit down with my good friend Epadiah Ravishal to talk about naming things in truly true role-playing games.
And it's a show where I sit down with my good friend Nathan Paoletta, where we talk about abstractions.
That's the word that we were looking for.
Yeah.
We've done it. We just did it.
We did it. We're done.
We found a word for the concept that we were trying to articulate to each other shortly before starting to record.
We're a little behind the scenes. We sat down and we were like, do we have anything to talk about on a hot mic today? Mm-hmm. And as often happens with us, I think we start off with like, no. And then we start talking about a thing and then we're like, we have to stop talking about this and get recording.
Save it for the show.
Save it for the show, yeah. But yeah, actually that's a tradition that goes all the way back to the Rockford Files. We've been doing that for almost a decade now.
Well, for the Rockford Files, we would get to it when we got to it.
Oh, yeah. But I think at the beginning, we before we start recording an episode about the Rockford Files, we would
start just kind of talking about it.
Yeah. And we're like, save it for the show.
Save it for the show. Which is why we started Plus Expenses, because we're like, we're just talking about stuff that's not the show.
Yeah, exactly.
And here we are. So a thing that has come up in the Discord actually recently, but also this is going back to one of my go-to pithy lines, and I think this number has crept up over time, but currently I'd say that 90% of game design is deciding on words.
Right.
And I think I started saying 50%, and then over the years that's just crept up. Deciding what to name things is critical. Why is that? Our medium is one of word, right? Both oral, it's an oral medium, and it's also a written medium, kind of simultaneously. So, yeah.
I think that this concept of abstraction is a good one here, where if we can put a name on it, we can then tie it up in a little bow and set it aside, right? Like we don't have to describe it over and over. The example that we were just talking about just before we started recording was in the upcoming Swords Without Master Fix-Up. There's a game that was originally published in Worlds Without Master, but it's a hack of swords called The Invisible Domains of the Silent Emperor. I hope I got that right.
It sounds right.
I'm going through like what is the penultimate revision, fingers crossed, and I kept telling people to count something at the table, like a very specific thing. Favor. It's called favor. And it was just like, count the favor. And there was also like a bit where I was like, and favor is like a motif in swords. So it's a thing that can have some things written on it, but it has 3 things written on it, but you can have only 1 or 2 things written on it because it's not completed. So I'm like, count the completed favor and then the incomplete favor. And just like, it was a gnarly sentence each time. I, the author of the game, had to reread it to remember what I meant by it. And then I was like, let's give it a name. let's call it the Silent Emperor's Beneficent Tolerance and just say how to calculate it, and then we're done. That's the only glory of hit points, right? Like that, that you can say, this is this. You know what the calculation is, and if you don't, you know where to look it up. Your brain is no longer thinking about that calculation. You're no longer thinking about this mess that is counting all these things on the table. You're thinking about his tolerance, and that's it. Because for almost anything else you need to know in the rules, you just need to know that that's a particular number.
This is why abstraction works, right? And this is what a game mechanic being an abstraction of some condition or set of conditions, so that it is manageable, and then so it can interact with other abstractions, right? That's kind of that's the whole thing we're doing, right? Like we're deciding at which level do we need to abstract these things such that, like, first of all, I'm not actually a sword and sorcery rogue, so we need to abstract what that is so that I can play one, right? Like, yes, that's what we're doing. That's what makes games feasible. And then I think you throw into that this observation that the name that you give something can itself be a useful abstraction. And in this context, it turns into a mechanical element, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
By saying this is the emperor's beneficent favor, now that's just like you said, now it's a number, and now we get to calculate it. And then much like a hit point, you could have some other way to calculate it that means something else in some other context. Like in this game is pretty tight, so it's not like going to do this in this particular game, but like we usually calculate it this way. But if you have this trick, then you actually calculate it a different way. Yeah. That's now a rule that's referring to this abstracted mechanic, that trying to explain that without coalescing that concept into those couple words.
Right.
Adds a whole nother paragraph of text to every time you try to explain, here's how you do the thing.
There's clearly going to be dangers for over abstracting. This is okay. First of all, I'm just going to apologize to all the programmers in our audience, because this is old hat for them. This is like constantly what they're doing when they're naming variables or functions and things in their programs or whatever. But like, yeah, you can easily over abstract and like take things that just don't need to have names. I'm saying this, I know you can program while you're programming. I assume you can when you're when you're designing a role-playing game, but I can't think of like an example that I have come across in my...
I think it's something that does stand out and thus gets ironed out in the process.
Right.
I'm thinking more of an experience, especially of reading, like going back and reading like the first draft of a game I wrote, or like a contest entry, or something written by someone coming from like a play culture or a design scene that I'm not familiar with, or something like that, where you're like, okay, I know what each of these words means, but I can't really put together how they are supposed to interact just from reading this. And sometimes that is hand in hand with the like big caps situation, where you capitalize every game term, right? So now all of a sudden you have a sentence that's like, first you capital C calculate the capital D defense and capital A attack of the capital E enemy, right? Like that stuff. Okay, so now each of these is an abstraction that might mean what I think it means, and might mean I need to turn to a page that has a bunch of tables and I need to derive a bunch of scores from, some other context. At the end of the day, what are your abstractions? Are these abstractions serving the goal of the game? Because like another vector for this is looking at combat, and you can abstract combat to roll a die, high roll wins. You can abstract it to play rock, paper, scissors, winner take all. You could abstract it to who do you think should win, right? And like, is that serving the game versus a much lower level set of abstractions that are more about, given these metaphors of these characters and how they're supposed to interact, how does a violent conflict unfold, and what does that mean? Which is unsatisfying, right? If your game is a big tactical game about war and valor on the battlefield, and then your resolution is play rock, paper, scissors. It's like, where does the valor come in?
Right. Are you brave enough to go scissors every time?
Every time. Yeah.
One of the things that I think abstractions do for us in kind of a nice way, but that can also be a double-edged sword, is we've been kind of talking about them as simply just a way to package up a set of rules and say, we'll give this a name, and from here on out, when we talk about this name, this is what this is. This may be, like you said, the rogue. This is player character. That's an abstraction, right? Like a bunch of stats we're throwing together. It's a weird, loose one. We don't need to be again. I want to my brain keeps wanting to go to programming. I want to make a divide there, because our brains aren't computers. There's a lot of parallels that can exist, but it's not it's not a one-to-one, and we'll lose the nuance there if we keep doing it. But like, we can hold a weird concept like player character in our head without having to enumerate all the things that is, because actually it's not just a set of stats. It's, you know, your conception of the character. It's also what other people at the table are like experiencing with your character. But it's also on this very larger level, just this concept of the character that the players are playing, that the GM is learning about, or maybe the designer is talking about, right? Like, we have to be able to talk about that, so we have to call it something. But one of the things that does when you get into that higher level, or maybe higher level is not the right term for it, but the more abstract abstraction, like the sort of bigger concept thing, you then can start looking at other games in that field, right? Like, I'm going to take a concrete example here, which is the phases in Swords. I spent a lot of time over the years dealing with those. And now when I start designing a game, I sometimes just think, how do I deal with the difference between, like, okay, take it back a little bit. Playing Dungeons and Dragons 30, 40 years ago, it was like, oh, we're in combat now, right? Like, that's it. Like, it's not the combat phase. And then you're out of combat and you're doing things. And like, I think even back then, the way you measured distance was different.
Yeah. And measuring time is different, right? Yeah. You go to the combat round and then you go back to measuring things in like minutes and hours.
And there's like a little ritual going into it. Like, you roll for initiative. That's a ritual. Although like, I don't, oh man, it's been so long since I played the earlier stuff, but I do remember, if it wasn't D&D, it was D&D adjacent, playing games where you rolled for initiative every round rather than just at the beginning. But anyways, so it's not like a ritual that says, hey, we're going into combat. It was like, this is just, we're going into a new round kind of thing. Anyways, those I can then think of as phases, and I could be like, that's our fighting phase, and this is our adventuring phase, or whatever. And that's fine. That'll get me somewhere, and I'll be able to like think about things. And when I'm like, I want to write a rule, but I want this rule to only happen in the adventuring phase, or I want this rule to only happen in the fighting phase, because if you could do this thing in the fighting phase, also in the adventuring phase, that would be really weird. One of the things that kind of comes up is with these games where you have to like, you have this economy that involves healing.
Sure, yeah.
You do have to do something different. If it's like in fighting, you need that emergency healing, and that has to happen right away. But then if you take it out of the fighting phase, it's like, I'm going to just keep healing at that exact same rate. And it's like, oh, okay, then everyone's healed up. Anyways, I am way off track. The point is, I can start thinking about all my games as phases. And I have done and have like, that's been fruitful. But it's also not great, right? Because sometimes I'm like, I don't want phases.
Right. At some point, does it become a limiting factor?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's like an abstraction that I have in my head that I use to like understand the game. And that's not a bad thing, but I have to be aware that I'm using it. Otherwise, I just start defining games as things that have phases, which is a ridiculous definition. Not a ridiculous one, but like, it's not necessarily the most productive one.
Sure. Yeah, this makes me just kind of think about how there's whole genre or kind of scenes of games that share a set of abstractions, right? So like, many OSR games, there's a whole world of like, here's an adventure, or here is a bestiary that you can use with like any of these games that is a self-selected OSR game. So in this, we will provide you the hit points that something has and the damage that it does. And like maybe some like saving throw numbers or something, because these are things that almost all of these games, if they don't have them, are aware that they are in context of other games that do have them and have like an easy way to translate this information from this game to this game. And that's a really powerful thing to create those those like design communities. Apocalypse World Moves similar, where, you know, there's a whole language of how to construct a move and what, what's a move trigger and what's a move outcome. What are the imagined outcomes that I want to guide people into when they go into this narrative context, right? That's what many moves are doing. And then you can work against that, right? You can also be like, okay, using the system of abstractions, what other purposes can I
what can I
do with it?
With them? Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe that gets a little bit to like specific word choice, right? So like part one,
right, abstraction
of an abstraction, we are naming things in order to create a more handleable, portable. There's the word. Thank you.
Yeah.
We are naming things to create a more portable object for
concept or whatever
for the game. But not even specifically abstracting, but just like, okay, what is the name of this thing? And how much that drives tone, thematic resonance, vibe, and frames things for the player, right? So in Worldwide Wrestling, it has, instead of, and this is something that is often renamed, right? But Apocalypse World has HX is, you're like
the help.
Well, no, the relationship things.
Oh, okay, yeah. Right. Been a while.
Right, that's HX.
Shows how much I harm is the, you're right.
Harm
HX
is HX is the like relationship-y.
Yeah. Help or interfere.
Kind of that's where that it goes into. Yeah, I forget exactly why it's called HX in particular, but anyway, in Worldwide Wrestling, that's heat, because the wrestling term for when someone has beef with someone is that they have heat with them. Mm-hmm. But it can also be used to reference how popular you are with the crowd if you have a lot of heat with the crowd. And it's like often vaguely pejorative in the sense of like that is like having heat is like because of, not pejorative, because of a reason that is not positive for you as a performer. But it also is like if there's a lot of heat between two wrestlers, that makes them more interesting. That makes the audience potentially more interested to see how that plays out in the ring, right? So renaming that, and then also the system works, a little differently because wrestling is different than a post-apocalyptic wasteland in some respects. But it just captures, as opposed to saying relationships, right? Right. Like that's one of the things I'm like, anytime, like I work pretty hard to get away from saying, okay, what is my relationship mechanic? Here are your relationships on your right. It's a good place to start. I have games that have that, but like, is there a more specific word that is actually talking about the dynamic that this interaction has in the game? And so he gets to that because it's like you build heat with each other. And that's a thing that happens in wrestling, and it's a thing that happens in the game. So that's a fairly straightforward example, I think. It's something you do with lots of like hacks, right? You end up renaming everything to be in line with the genre and the tone of the new game. Yeah.
And I mean, like you said, that's 90%. I think that like just doing that, right? Like just taking a game like Apocalypse World and just renaming everything in it to match your genre is a design exercise that is going to have you thinking about what you want out of the game in a way that you can't help but continue to change things, right? Like it
feeds back. You start to say, oh, if my stats are, this is just a off the dome example. If I want to do a superhero PBTA game and I want I'm interested in like the history of comic books and how characters change over time. So it's like, okay, my stats are going to be like Gold Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age, I don't know, 90s or whatever, right? Like, and then everything else, you're just kind of renaming things. And it's kind of like at some point you end up looking at that and being like, all right, if you are roll plus bronze for this move, what does that actually mean? And then you start feeding back to be like, okay, let me figure out what moves mean in this context. Maybe your highest stat gives you access to a certain move that you can't. Right. If silver is your highest stat, that means you have the special Silver Age related move that you get to do that you can't do if gold is your highest stat, right? Or something like that. So you start cycling back to fulfill the promise of those word choices.
Right. Yeah.
That's where it starts to feed on itself and give you some good design outcomes, I think.
I'm going to relate an anecdote here. I was at a conference this is years ago, at a conference about games and education. It was a very interesting thing. There was a lot of teachers there, and they were very interested in how to use games to teach. That is not a topic that I have. I could talk about games forever. I don't know anything about teaching. And that, like, part of that was to get people who could talk about games to talk to people who could talk about teaching. But like, there's a whole lot more to be done there than just Epi going to a single conference. But I remember at one, like, there was like a breakout session or whatever, and somebody gave like a talk on how to design a role-playing game for the classroom. And I believe they said, well, first you have to decide like what skills your characters are going to need. And I died inside. Fortunately, I had a friend there who was like, at the table, pulled out Fast and Starlet to show the people at the table, like, you don't need skills. You know, like, you don't have to come up with a skill list to make a role-playing game. There's other ways to do this. But I say that, and I bring that up because that is definitely, like, for years, that's how I understood role-playing. Like, those years were the 90s, but, like, I would want to make a game, and I would sit down and I would try and come up with the list of skills that were important to characters, which I guess I'm bringing up as like an illustration of just that thing I was saying before, where sometimes you get this abstraction, like a skill list in and of itself is a weird abstraction. We're not actually made of skill lists, despite what LinkedIn would want you to believe. But it was like the only way I could think about games at the time. Like I was having like my big breakthrough at one point was when I was like, oh, I only need one, skill that deals with like dealing with computers, because I don't actually want this to be like a whole subsystem of the game.
I don't need electrical engineering and typing and
exactly. Yeah.
That is a potentially promising space to start really going hog wild with words, though, right? Like,
right. Yeah.
If you are, your game does have skills, and you go from a first draft that's like drive, brawl. I'm thinking 90s. Drive.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Brawl, computer
turn
use.
into a bat.
That's not a skill. That is a special power. But but like, what happens when you start saying the thing that the person is doing when they're driving that is interesting to me in this game is actually
maneuver.
Yeah, but I was going to say is actually like a getaway. Like that's when this is important, is when you're when you're in a vehicle and you are getting away from something. So let's call that skill getaway instead of drive, right?
Right.
The reason that punching someone in the face is important is because why is punching someone in the face important?
Because their face demands it.
Because they've because they've stepped up to you, right? Because they're
right. Yeah.
So the skill here isn't really brawl. Like, let's get into a big set of fisticuffs. The skill here is like
ending the fight. Like, that's what you want to do.
Putting someone in their place, right? So finding a word that kind of encapsulates, So if it's like get away, step off, and instead of computer use, it's like uncover secret, right? Like that's why you're on the computer. You're trying to uncover a secret. So now this is a different game, right? Now diving into like what exactly are you using these things to do? And
if your getaway is like, you take your drive and you turn it into tailing and losing a tail,
right, yeah,
and like that's or if you're punching someone in the face becomes scuffle. For me, like, feels like, we're not actually going to fight.
Yeah,
I'm just going to try and get out of this as unhurt as I possibly can. My goal is to dissuade the other person.
Right. So it's like not brawl, scuffle, and duel. Those are three different things that are kind of covered in the same conceptual space, I think. But that mean this is kind of getting back to like, how are you framing it for a player? If a player is looking at their sheet and like, oh, I have this skill called duel. So it's like, all right, now I'm looking for opportunities to duel people.
Right. Yeah.
That is framing that interaction or framing that character dynamic differently than, oh, on my sheet it says brawl. So maybe I'm looking for opportunities to brawl, but also it's like, oh, I'm in a brawl, so now I get to use my skill. And like, even then, now this is it a player directed? I'm looking for a reason to do the thing,
right? Yeah.
Or is it more of a circumstantial? Oh, I'm in a context, so that unlocks my ability to do the thing.
And like that gets a little bit into like looking at the next level up abstractions of like calling them skills or calling them moves, right?
Yeah.
Like in my head, thanks to Apocalypse World, if you call them moves, then duel is like you, the player, saying, I'm going for a duel here, and we're going to resolve it according to the rules that I have in front of me. But calling it a skill, duel means I better hope that this person doesn't want to brawl,
right? Because
my brawl is low.
It's like this guy's rolling up his sleeves, and I'm like, all right, I'm pulling my sword, and I hope he has one too, right? So that I can challenge him and make it more. And this is a total this feeds into the intended play experience, right? Is this a play experience where you need to this is something I think of as a GURPSy thing. You need to massage situations so that you can bring your skills to bear, right?
Right, yeah.
Or is it more narratively open to be like, oh, I'm doing this thing, and then by declaring you're doing the thing, that then opens up, this is the move model, right? By declaring you're doing the thing, assuming it makes sense in narrative context, etc., then you move on to, okay, how do we do the thing?
Yeah. We're going to resolve it with these rules here. You kind of want to talk a little bit about like the fun you can have naming things, I guess.
Oh yeah, for sure. As anyone will know once they read Swords Without Master,
right?
Epi has fun naming things.
Well, I mean, I have my tirade. Maybe I've done this on the podcast before, but like,
is it a tirade or is it a rant?
Oh, that's a good question. It depends on, what are we going to name this? I'll tell you what, I'll give it, and then we'll let the scholars sort it out. All right, so Dungeon Master. The name Dungeon Master for the role, the player role, Dungeon Mastering, I think is a thing of beauty. Like there's a poetry to it that's wonderful. I can remember when I first read the words or heard the words Dungeon Master and thinking, oh, like before I even had this, like, talk about abstractions, like our concept of dungeon is solely from Dungeons and Dragons, right? Like an actual dungeon is not anything like what Dungeons and Dragons that presents, right? Sure. Like an actual dungeon is just a hole that they put you in to seal you up, or a collection of such holes. Anyways. But Dungeon Master, dungeon has a medieval feel to it. It feels scary. It feels, serious. And then, like, this is the person in charge of it. Like, this is very much, like, evocative of, I think, of the Jeff Easley cover to the AD&D Dungeon Master Guide with the opening the door with all the devils behind him. Anyways, also think of Dungeon Master from the D&D cartoon. Parentheses complimentary. Anyways, Dungeon Master, wonderful term for that role. For Dungeons and Dragons, a thing of beauty. Then we saw that and we said, okay, but not everybody's playing Dungeons and Dragons, so let's take the dungeon off and we'll add Game Master. And I want to say that Game Master, as a term of art, is perfectly fine. In fact, GM, the abbreviation of that, perfectly fine. Everyone, like, this is GM. I'm GMing. That's a game master. How do you GM this? I'm going to GM for my friends. Perfectly fine. All of that is, I don't want to say that there's anything wrong with any of that, but it has no poetry, right? And maybe it's not perfectly fine because it's gendered. And if I say game mistress, a whole new set of connotations come about, right? Like
general manager, also difficult in a different way. Also no poetry.
Yeah. So we have this, I'm going to say opportunity. You have an opportunity here. If you have a GM'd game, right, to come up with the name of what that is. Now, I know that I am at odds with people because 2 or 3 times a year in my streams, somebody's like, just call it a GM.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, why do you hate life? What is it about poetry that hurts you?
There's a reason that everyone renames it, right?
Right. Yeah.
I think I think it's simultaneously, it is true that you can read a game and be like, okay, so that's the GM, right?
Right.
You know, like you said, there's a generalized, it's a Kleenex of term, right? Like it's a generalized term. We all we
can say then I call my GMs this,
right?
And everyone's like, fine, that's
great.
fine, yeah.
But the act of redefining what you call the person who does that role in your game is an act of saying, look, my game is not generic. This set of roles, like, and that's the other thing. The GM role, the set of responsibilities and obligations that player has is different from game to game. So you do need to define those, and giving that person a different name can help make that process both easier for you conceptually as a designer, but also just be like, okay, we know the main term, and I know that when we talk about this game, I'm just going to talk about the GM because I feel like I sound a little, I don't know, hoity-toity or whatever if I'm calling this person so in Input the Perverse or the editor. So like if I'm talking about the editor all the time. But in that game, a lot of what the editor does is they are expressly directed to say, okay, this scene is done now. Like, and which GMs do all the time, but like in an editorial fashion, right? In a way that says, okay, maybe there's still action to happen. Maybe if we played this out in a realism mode, it would transition to a different location immediately following on these events or whatever. But as the editor, I think the next thing we need to do is go to the graveyard. So, you know, this scene's over. We're starting our next scene in the graveyard. And like that is a specific thing that you need to do in that game to maintain some of the narrative poetry of the ongoing story. Similarly, but for different reasons, in Apocalypse World, you're the MC, right? You're the master of ceremonies, and that means something there, I believe. In Worldwide Wrestling, you're creative, which is both a nerdy wrestling term that's just kind of encapsulating the idea that, oh, there's someone who's writing these stories backstage that the wrestlers are performing. And there's a whole thing of there's a joke that there's a whole web series called this. It's like creative has nothing for you, which is like the idea of the wrestler being like, all right, what am I doing tonight? And the writer or producer or whatever being like, I don't know. Do whatever you want. I don't have anything for you. Anyway, and I like that idea, just playing with that idea. But then being creative lets me make really funny jokes in the text. Like there's a whole chapter called Being Creative, right? That's great. That's a good joke. Everyone loves it. But in the context of wrestling, creative has a specific set of things. What are the storylines? What are the story beats that you are handing to the wrestlers? And then you see what happens, and then you change what is going to happen next based on what just happened that was out of your hands. You pick up what you want in between what all the players are doing. All the players do stuff, the events of the game happen, and then you pick up the pieces and go, all right, what do I want to see next? And you need to synthesize that into the next, all right, here's all your bullet points, go out there. And I think that's a distinct thing you do over being a dungeon master. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's there's a chicken or the egg thing going on too, where you're like, like we were just saying before, if you just right away when you have a name for a game and you're like, I'm going to have a GM in my notes, I'm going to call him GM, but let me see if I can come up with just a name to just see what it feels like, right? Or whatever. And then that can change how you design that role. Or it could be the other way around. You're designing the role and you're like, I'm getting really far away from what a GM is. I need a name that doesn't, confuse it. But and like I said, I got plenty of notes that are just GM does this, GM does that, like for games before I got names for it. But
that's the beauty of naming, is that you can always change them, and you don't need to be locked in to something if you don't have the word choice perfect yet, right? This is like what's the diction of the game? Like, what's the actual words that you use to call things? It is total. I think we all do this, and I think it's totally not only normal but probably advisable to be like, all right, get the idea together, and like, all right, the GM does this, and the player characters do this, and these are their skills, and these are their hit points, right? Or whatever. Here's their fate points that they use to affect the narrative. And then as you go along, it's like, oh, well, since my game is about, I don't know, since my game is about seafaring adventure, maybe these like plot points that I've come up with should be called, tides or something, like the tides sweep you around. You're able to change the tide with this one action. Oh, that's cool. Is there a mechanic there about changing the tide? Like, getting wrapped up in that stuff, I think, is productive. And sometimes can get you to like a breakthrough on something that is not necessarily not working, but I feel like sometimes when something's kind of flat, it's kind of like, this is kind of just functional. It just kind of works, but it's kind of try renaming it. Rename it something that sounds exciting.
Yes.
And then you have to rebuild it to fulfill the excitement of that name.
Meet the promise that you're making.
I have an example.
Okay.
That I think coalesces a number of these things from recent playtesty stuff.
Oh, yeah. I'm
not sure if I've gone over this specifically on the podcast or in a Plus Expenses, but I've been doing a lot of renaming in Mortal Skein.
Yeah.
Which, first of all, deciding on that as the name of the game helped me with some other things, because now the skein metaphor of like
more names fall out from that. Yeah,
more stuff kind of falls out from that. So that's great.
Yeah.
So you're these legendary kind of mythic sword and sorcery / high fantasy / dark fantasy characters, and you're in this fantastic world pursuing and fighting against the fate that is before you, right? And you can get into these conflicts. These specific ones are contests, where there's a specific like thing you're fighting with someone else over, right? And there's a couple different contexts for getting into a contest, but because this game is all about seeing the future before you, it is diceless except for the one time you roll dice. So you have stacks of tokens that you generate from what is on your character sheet, and then when you get into these contests, there's a token bidding mechanic that you do to do the thing. And something that I was having a lot of trouble with was articulating how the mechanic works when I'm explaining it to someone. Right? Like, I can write it down. I write down the procedure, and I'm like, okay, so you do this, then you do this, then you do this. And then when I'm trying to explain it to players, it was difficult. Mainly because it was kind of doing the thing where we're talking about it kind of towards the beginning, where I'm like, okay, so on your sheet you have this thing. It's called Ardor, and so when we get into the contest, you're going to make your pool out of your other. You have your other stats. So you pick 2 of your stats. You make your pool out of the stats. So you have this pool of tokens from your stats, and then you also have your Ardor, which at a certain point you can spend to add to your pool that's in the conflict, and then you're bidding out of the pool for the conflict. But then once you finish bidding, some of those are going to go away, and some of them are going back on your sheet. You can hear. This is like, what?
Yeah.
So in order to figure out how to just not even change the mechanic, really, it changed a little bit just to kind of fit the shape of this new way of explaining it. But redefining the procedure so that it's like, okay, when you get into a conflict, you're gonna have a pool of tokens that is called your zeal, and you create your zeal by taking 2 of your stats, adding them together. That's your zeal. And then as you go through the conflict, sometimes you can spend Ardor. When you do, it's either going to go onto, you also ante. So there's like there's a pool of ante, and then there's a pool of zeal that each person has. And when you spend Ardor, that's going to go you're either anteing in again, or it's going to go into your zeal pool. And then you do into the bid, and then when you're done with the bid, you take your zeal pool, and in some circumstances you get some Ardor back out of it, and some circumstances it just goes away. And then there's a fallout of like, does that also impact your stats, right? So now by adding the abstraction of the zeal pool, I'm cutting off the do I have to be paying attention to the stats on my sheet while I'm in the conflict that also is about my stats? It's like, no.
Yeah.
Okay, those give you a number, and now don't worry about those. And when we're done with this, we go back to that. And, you might have to change one of them. And that's an outcome that we get to decide, see how things go. And that was just very freeing because on the one hand, I'm like, I don't want to add more stuff, right? Like there's already plenty of stuff in the game. I don't want to add more stuff, but it actually had a clarifying purpose in making the procedure just so much easier to explain and to handle. And so now, because I have this separate abstraction of the zeal pool, in some circumstances when there's like specific moves or whatever that might interact with it, instead of saying add to the tokens that you have for your conflict, it just says add to your zeal pool, right? Add zeal, or you lose zeal. And that's just an easy thing that you can have as a mechanic, and not a sentence and a half every time explaining what subcontext this is going to come into sometimes. So that's just kind of an example there. And then specifically calling it the zeal pool. First of all, I get them because I love jokes. I already had ardor, which I think is a good juicy word, and is representing that for the characters. It's representing your strength of emotion, your drive, essentially, right? As you're gaining ardor, spending it to do things, etc. And then pairing it with zeal, I get to reference the metal band Zeal and Ardor. So like, that's great. Yes. But also zeal is like, in this moment, this is representing my thrill to win.
Right. Yeah.
And it's temporary, and then it goes away. And that like feels right to me for like, you get into a conflict, you do a thing, and then that goes away. You don't need it again until another conflict. Names.
It's interesting too, because you can is this too much of a tangent? High school geometry. Sorry, high school algebra. That's what I meant. Like that's sort of what we're getting at here. You could be like A plus 3 times B equals C, and now anywhere you could be like, I can forget that A plus 3 times B, and I'll just use C wherever that is. And you can reduce things down. But like part of what I'm getting at is that like I have found this isn't necessary, but I have found that when I go and name a thing, I relook at it, what it is, and like we're going to bring this all the way back to my inciting example at the beginning of the podcast. I was like, spend all this time figuring out how many favor you have, including the ones that aren't filled out or whatever. Then I was like, count your complete favor, add 1 to it. It's the exact same result, no matter what. Like I was saying weird things throughout where I was like, ignore this one, but then add, this one or whatever. But like the end result was count how many complete ones there are and add 1. You're good every single time. There's a thing in game design where sometimes you've spent like a whole lot of effort to describe a thing that not just describing it and saying that's giving it a name, but sometimes the process of giving it a name allows you to re-examine that effort and go, oh, there is an easier way to calculate this. Like this number is never not going to be 1, so I'm just going to make it 1. Like instead of telling you all the different conditions, if it's this, then it's 1. If it's this, then it's 1, but never more than 1, or whatever. No, it's just going to be 1. It's going to be 1 every time.
Sometimes you've done that because there's one circumstance where you're like, okay, in this one case,
exactly,
it is going to be 0, right?
Yeah.
And so you're like, okay, so I want to make sure that my calculation includes that and get through all the stuff, and then you're like, oh, but if I just make it 1, what happens to that one case? And sometimes it's like, maybe that case isn't that important. Just let it go.
Or that's the one time you subtract 1 from it. Right. And that's it.
You make it an exception instead of just this big calculation that's going to have the same result for most of it. Yeah.
So, I guess what I'm saying is that sometimes you're tying yourself into knots. You don't know it because you're building it piece by piece.
Yeah.
And then when it comes time to abstract it, that's usually a moment when your brain is like, okay, but can we do more about this? Or at least that's how my brain works. Like I, go to abstract it, and then it's like, okay, now let's make this elegant, because that was awkward and you knew it was. That's why you tried to fix it. And
yeah. I mean, and that's the trick, right? Like that's part of the work, is being like, okay, how do I take this thing that is functional but has a clunky and make it so that it's more elegant, understandable, and maybe that has some knock-on effects into other things. But yeah, I think that's something that you do get better at, identifying that feeling of like, oh, this is clunky. You can kind of put a pin in it and be like, this is clunky. Yeah. I'm going to deal with it later. And then sometimes you get back to it like, oh boy, like now I have to completely redo this because I've done all this other stuff. And like, good thing I remembered to come back and check on this because, yeah.
I feel like we have a future episode where we talk about clunky on purpose. I think that's a whole nother topic, because I think because I agree, there's like a lot of clunky stuff that I don't want, but then every so often I'm like, I really want this to be clunky.
Yeah.
I need this to be clunky.
I think for future scholars to see if we actually come back to this.
Yeah.
I think we should, because it's a good topic. But I would say and maybe it's a conversation about the compare and contrast. Is something clunky, baroque, or
impertinent?
Yeah, or impertinent. I was going to say, or does it cause friction? But I think impertinent also works. But I think of a lot of that kind of stuff as baroque in game design.
Yeah.
Like something that is kind of intentionally has a lot going on.
Yeah. I think we've not exhausted this topic. I think this topic is far beyond what we can do.
Right. I mean, I think it's one of those like live with it kind of things. Like once you start thinking about it and you live with it in your design for a little bit, you start to see how it falls out into other things. I guess there are a couple like pro tip things. Go to the thesaurus early and often. I'd say. Yeah.
Love having a thesaurus open on my screen at all times.
Find all those weird synonyms. It's wonderful.
Look for old. In swords. This is just like a moment of like, I was so happy to find these words. In swords, talking about the Eidolon folios. I was like, I need words because the concept of an Eidolon is some piece of art or some piece of nature of our world that reminds you of your rogue. Eidolon folios are collections of these things, either by definition, like plastic dinosaurs you had as a kid, plus He-Man figures, or like an actual, like the ones we're presenting to people, we're selling, which are like tarot size art cards illustrated by some of the greatest artists of our time. Here's a whole set of them. And I needed to distinguish between ones that were like, hey, we're going to play the game, but all of our Eidolons have to come from this pool, or B, we're going to play the game and this pool is a good starting place for where, like, the kinds of Eidolons we're looking for, right? And I hit upon complete, but complete with the archaic spelling.
EAT.
Yeah, the PLEAT at the end, yeah. And then exemplary, because complete and exemplary, those two terms, as spelled as they are, mean the best, but they also mean complete as whole or an example. And I was like, this is beautiful.
Found it.
I love it. So anyways, keep a thesaurus open, because sometimes that happens. Sometimes you hit something like that, and you're like, this is the best.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a good note to end our discussion here on
our complete
discussion. If you are throwing around some terms for your game, want to bounce those off some of the scholars, feel free to join our Discord.
Yeah, share
what you're working on, or talk about word choices, because that's most of the game design. So we can field that for sure. It's just, it's been it's been a pretty solid summer, solid summer for the scholars. Yeah, I'd say in the Discord.
Very good.
It's always nice to see new faces, but it's been both productive and fun to see what people are working on in there. And yeah, we are gonna keep on finishing swords. We have a lot of word choices to make in the annual, as we're getting spun up on that. So maybe more about that soon. But in the meantime, you can find all of our links to all of the things that we are working on as the Unwritten Earths over at unwrittenearths.com. including the aforementioned Discord, but also our Patreon, where you can sign up to get our other show, the Plus Expenses, which comes out every week in between the every other week drops of the main show. So you get twice as much of us talking about more than just games for just I think $3 a month is the lowest level there. And that keeps the lights on around here. So we appreciate all of our patrons very much. And there's still time to get in on Swords Without Master. Late pledges are still open. So check that out. This show is by us. Go us. Our music is by Will Yobst. Thank you, Will. And I feel like at some point we need to come up with a new ending question. But until we rephrase it, Epi, have we made a game yet?
No. So exhausted.
Please stop making me make games.
Yes. Just chained here to my desk.